Looking to find your art style? Stick around. Hello and welcome to Art Block, the show where we talk about art and how it's made. I'm your host Spirit, and today we'll be talking about art styles as well as how to make one. Before we begin, if you like videos talking about art and want to see more, please be sure to subscribe and click the bell notification. It supports me and is practically free. Now then, let's jump into it. One of the biggest and probably most discussed topics in the art world is the topic of art style. You'll see it being talked about everywhere, from people complaining about the Cal art style and how all modern Western shows use a similar style, to simply admiring others' works. In the past, me and my colleagues have discussed how it's important not to root oneself in a certain style, and this is still true. The issue when it comes to rooting yourself in a certain art style is that you will start developing bad habits with your art. This can come down to how you sketch your characters, to how you construct your figures, as well as countless other things. A lot of what you'll learn in art school is actually less how to illustrate things, and rather how to use various media such as paints, pastels, and whatnot. Even then, a majority of the artists I have met online are usually self-taught, and thus haven't gained the knowledge one would in a more educational environment. I will get to the topic of art school in a minute, but basic summary here is that when it comes to illustration, don't set your sights on replicating or maintaining one specific style. The purpose of this video is less to tell you how to replicate a certain execution, and is rather a guide on how to further evolve your creative skills. I will be discussing how to come up with and develop a style for more consistent purposes. However, in this case I should emphasize that learning and understanding the basics is going to be far more practical than learning how to draw in one specific style. Step 1 is going to be studying from nature and practicing with accuracy. What do I mean with this? Well, a big part of learning how to be an illustrator is being able to draw from life and use observation. In order to improve and grow, you need to be able to replicate what's in front of you, as well as be able to interpret what you're looking at properly and learn from it. When you're just starting out, drawing stuff within your own interest is okay. However, you will need to branch out and learn how to do as wide of a variety as you can. Though learning certain techniques and technical skills is important, quite often when you draw from life, you'll find that there are certain things which make your drawing different from your peers. Maybe you interpreted the face of a model differently. Maybe you shaded things in a different manner, or you drew your line work in different ways than the person next to you. Even if you're just drawing from observation by yourself, odds are there will be small personal touches that are a reflection of how you see the world. Now, when I say there will be certain stylistic touches in your observation, I don't mean that you should strive to make your observation pieces styled. No matter how good your line work or shading is, if you have broken or lazy understanding of anatomy, your work will suffer in the future. This crosses over into the next step, which is to seek out constructive criticism if you can. Find other artists who may be more skilled in your weak points and ask them how to improve your work. If you find you're not the best with realistic anatomy, seek out artists who have a better understanding of it, or at least have a keen eye for detail. No matter how long you've been drawing, everyone has room to improve and is capable of making changes. Heck, I've been drawing constantly for over 6 years, 4 of which were spent in proper art classes learning my craft and still learning and developing. Heck, I would say that out of those years, the past 2 years are the period where I felt I was actually getting good with my skills. And those were 2 years that I was out of classes and simply drawing on my own time. This brings me to probably the most important line that I could say, and that is this. Art school does not automatically make you a good artist. I think there's a common misconception that attending art school automatically makes your art a professional level or something. Just because you are able to pass courses in school doesn't mean that your work is good enough to be immune from criticism or growth. I've seen artists who have been drawing for much longer than me get locked in a particular style or execution, and it shows in their artwork. When all you draw is cartoons or flat-colored furries, you start developing bad habits which will bleed into your art. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, I've attended art school and got my certificate, so my art must be good enough at this point. Nah, sorry to say, fam, but that isn't true. During my entire year of AP art, I thought that my artwork was great and ready to be sold for a bunch of money. Even a few months out of that class, I was looking at my past self ready to slap her because of how complacent I was at the time. Yes, seeking out criticism can be hard. It's difficult to have to admit, yeah, I could have done that better. But whenever you get suggestions on how to change stuff, it's an opportunity for you to improve. Now, that's not to say that everyone's criticism is necessarily going to help. There are a lot of cases where people are just talking out of their butt or want you to do something to their tastes, but a majority of the time it'll usually be people who genuinely want to see you improve. Third step to finding your own art style is by doing a bit of reflection and finding what you like. Maybe there's one artist who you really like for his painting style. Maybe there's another who you think draws their eyes in a really cute way. The important thing to understand when it comes to your style is a combination of your understanding when it comes to interpreting life as well as a reflection of your interests. And here's the biggest kicker about that second part: our interests change and develop over time. Had you asked me what I was interested in artistically about a year ago, I would have answered that I wanted to more accurately replicate an anime-esque style. Nowadays, I have taken almost a complete 180 and have jumped down the rabbit hole of trying to do detailed painting. Even your interests outside of art will influence your execution when it comes to your drawing, and in general, your art style will usually be a subconscious reflection of your interests working their way into your art. Of course, there are also cases where we will find some inspiration from other artists. Quite often, our subconscious style will be influenced by looking at art that we like, and as a result, our art is a reflection of our tastes. The more time goes by, the more we find new artists with new executions that cause our taste in art to change, and as a result, our style will naturally change along with them. Now, that's not to say that we copy every single aspect. Quite often, our style develops by seeing what other people do, taking elements of what we do like as well as modifying elements we don't like. You'll find that your style will naturally develop over time, and you shouldn't be afraid of letting it change because it is a part of yourself. This leads us into the next part, which is how you actually create an art style. Now, when I say create an art style, this is less for the purposes of people recognizing your brand and more for the purposes of creating a set project. Though, what you do with this information is up to you. When it comes to actually creating an art style, the first thing you need to ask yourself is what your main source material is going to be. Furries, humans, animals, ponies, what have you. Regardless of whether you're working from life or a source material, determining your source material is going to be imperative to figuring out execution. The second thing you need to ask yourself is, what is the art style going to be used for? This is incredibly important because when it comes to things like animation or comics, overly complex styles or designs will be far more time consuming to work with. I learned this the hard way. Back in 2015, when I was planning on making 2000 Degrees into a webcomic, I was going to take an anime-esque style. However, due to the complexity and just how time-consuming anime is to replicate, I quickly found that this was not going to be a viable option for what was ultimately a one-man show. Especially when it comes to doing animation, unless you are using a 3D medium or have an incredibly high budget, complex styles and character designs will be a great hindrance and may very much be counterintuitive to your workflow. Especially if you're working on something like 2D puppet-based animation, you will need to consider the limitations of your project. Thirdly, ask yourself what the themes of your project are going to be. In cases of shows like The Amazing World of Gumball, the mixture of styles and executions complement the chaotic nature of their comedic world because it itself is an exaggeration of our already crazy world. Meanwhile, more serious shows like Legend of Korra will use more adult animation styles due to the fact that the show covers darker themes and is meant to appeal to a more adult audience. That's not to say that a cutesy art style can't gel with adults. I mean, look at Agretzko. Point is, your style should reflect the relative themes of your story, or at least have a purpose for being different than the themes you'll be covering. Fourthly, what shapes are you drawn to, and what elements do you want to adapt from other stories? This more applies to people who are heading a project or at least have creative control on the designs. I personally prefer sharper, more defined shapes and elegant features. You'll see things like my Furrow City style and even my normal cartoon style tend to feature a lot more sharper shapes over the rounded chibi style that a lot of cartoons will use. Fifthly, don't be afraid to try new things. Odds are, especially if you're working on a team, the first version you're going to come up with will most likely not stick. Now, when it comes to informal stuff, natural change over time is generally okay. However, on professional or long-term projects, establishing a base level of consistency at the beginning is going to be key to maintaining professionalism. In cases like this, create multiple preliminary designs and decide which elements you like, then create a final draft implementing the desired traits. When creating the beta versions of your designs, try to cover as wide of a variety of styles and executions in order to open up as many avenues of possibility. Your original idea may be good, however you may find that one of your experimental drawings has a certain trait that you really like. Sixth, create a show bible of sorts to help you and your team stay consistent. This includes rules of how certain expressions should be drawn, how characters are proportioned, the way scenes should be shaded, etc. Of course, this usually comes after you've developed a visual style to your project. However, writing down the rules ahead of time may make it way easier for you and anyone else working on the project to maintain consistency as well as develop character sheets and references. Seventh and finally, continue to practice with it. You'll find that the style will naturally evolve the more you draw it. The more you draw in it, the more ways you'll find to streamline it and make corrections. The more you learn and grow, the more the style will adapt and evolve alongside you. Also, don't be afraid to incorporate different techniques with the style. Maybe try coloring it in a painterly style one day, or go lineless for an afternoon. Art is art, and artwork is an embodiment of improvement and expression. So, how did you find your art style? And what are some ways you feel are good to help others develop and further one's improvement? Tell me about it in the comments below. And that's about it for today's show. If you liked what you saw and you want to see more, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to receive more notifications for future videos. Also be sure to follow me on Twitter and DeviantArt, where I post artwork outside of the show. A big thank you to my patrons, such as Max Zagier and Mr. Eaton, for supporting the show. Links to all my pages are in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Spirit, and I'll see you next time.